Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 145. I'm really blessed to be here with Mark Spede, Director of Bands at Clemson University. And I first learned about Mark during COVID. He was sort of leading some CBDNA athletic band stuff virtually and all that stuff. And I've been kind of looking into what he's done over the years. And he has been at Clemson University for quite a long time. I'm looking here for his first, how long he's been there. I probably should know this at this point, but I believe it was 2002, so quite some time. He does do the marching band, the jazz bands, the wind bands. So he kind of does a little bit of everything, or I guess I would say a lot of everything. And the conversation we're going to have is going to center around. I'm going to ask him some sort of questions that some people would like to have answered on the kind of how Clemson does things sort of route, especially around some of the details in the marching band. That'll be a short Q&A at the beginning. Then we're going to talk specifically about culture and how the culture of the Clemson band is and how that's become and what's important to him and how your philosophy, your personal philosophy and the culture of the band and all that can change through the years and how it probably should change as you're growing and maturing through your career. We're going to talk a little bit about conducting and a conversation specifically geared towards you band directors. People, these are things that may be common conducting concepts that are not taught in undergraduate conducting, but will help our students greatly. We're going to delve a little bit into exercise and nutrition science. I know this is a passion of Mark's as well as something I'm very interested in as well. And then we're going to end with some recommendations of pieces and composers and things like that. So stay tuned. I hope you really enjoyed this episode 145 with Mark Spede. Mark, thanks for being here. So appreciative of your spending your time with us. We're going to start with a couple sort of fairly quick questions about the Clemson program, just from some of our listeners. So first question I have for you is, tell us a little bit about the WIND program at Clemson.
Sure. We have a comprehensive band program. So the marching band kind of is the largest, obviously. We also have two concert groups, one jazz ensemble. We have basketball pep band. We have another smaller pep band that does some other athletic events. And then we have some smaller ensembles, low brass, brass quintet, clarinet ensemble, saxophone ensembles. So they all come under the umbrella of the band program. The unusual part about Clemson is we don't have a traditional music education or performance major. We have a performing arts degree. It's a BA, and you can emphasize either music, theater, or audio technology. And we've had that degree for a little over 20 years, and a lot of programs are now adding that because it's sort of for the modern world, it's a little bit more useful, perhaps if you're going into a career that doesn't involve teaching or performing.
Okay, so what about is it the Clemson Wind Ensemble or the Wind Symphony is the top group?
Well, the top group, I haven't changed the name of it since I got here. It's the symphonic band, but
Symphonic
it's
band.
essentially a wind ensemble. It's about 50 to 55 players.
So that's the top group
Yes.
for Clemson.
Yeah.
What are some of the most recent things you guys have done with that group?
Oh boy. Well, we cover most of the major repertoire, Lincolnshire Posy and Hindemith Symphony, and I really tailor the repertoire to the ability of the group at that, in that particular semester. And it does vary a little bit from year to year and semester to
Sure.
semester. So I typically will program, on a concert, maybe one grade six, two or three grade fives, and then, a couple of grade fours in there. So we can dig in on the harder stuff a little bit and not have to worry too much about some of the grade four stuff. Um, and that seems to be a good way that I go about doing it anyway. But I do play a lot of new music. Sometimes, I'll look at a program, I'll put together a program and I'll realize, oh my gosh, all this music has been written since 2010
Mhm.
or, something like that. Um, yeah, so it's a little bit, it's a potpourri of stuff, I guess you'd say.
Well, I think a lot of teachers out there might think that if you're at a collegiate level, you can just program anything you want. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that you said that you take your students' abilities and you program to that. And no matter what level we teach, I think that's an important thing.
Sure.
The jazz program, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Tim Hurlbert, the associate director here, runs the jazz ensemble. It's been around at Clemson since the big band era, and even slightly before that. I think in the 20s, they had a group here that was actually traveling throughout the Southeast playing dances. And then as the big band era hit full stride, they were really popular in the Southeast. And actually, most of the guys that were in the band made a living while they were in school. They not only covered their tuition and room and board, but they had some pocket money because of all the gigs they were doing. But anyway, it became a full part of the ensemble in the for credit in the 80s, and it's been going very strong ever since. And again, we have the ability of the group varies a little bit from semester to semester and year to year. So sometimes they're tackling some really cutting edge, difficult stuff, and other times, might be a little bit more mainstream.
Great. And let's talk. Well, I have some questions that are kind of surrounding the marching band side of things. So last number I saw was you're in the 350 area for marching band members.
Yes.
So first question, do you use any technology in learning drill?
Yes. We've been a fully digital band since it was even possible to do that. So um, I want to say 2017, 2018, somewhere in there, we went completely digital, no more paper. So everything we deliver to the students is via their smartphone. And when we first started this, we didn't have everybody on a smartphone. So we actually bought a few iPhones, you know,
Cool.
on the cheap. As long as they had Wi-Fi, it would work. So we started out using the UDB app, Ultimate Drill Book, and still using that. And in the early days, we used Dropbox to put all the PDFs of the music in there, and then so they would have to, go to that folder for their instrument. So we had it all organized online. More recently, we've been using Beam, which is kind of under the same umbrella as the UDB app. And yeah, so we've been very, very happy with the technology.
Cool. I've actually done a couple episodes with Josh Gall. If Beam is new to people, I think I did an episode of between 100 and 110, and he kind of goes through that whole thing. Super cool programs. How many new shows do you learn per year with the marching band?
We kind of split the difference between bands that do a different show every week and a band that does one show a year. So we have 7 home games. We will do 3 main halftime shows plus a military appreciation day show, which is a patriotic show. So essentially, I would call it 3.5 shows because the military show is kind of a lot of times we'll have to put that one together in one week, pre-rehearsal. So it's a little bit lighter on drill. But then the other 3 shows, we try and plan it out carefully so that we have at least 2 weeks. Uh, five rehearsals would be 2 weeks to learn each of the halftime shows.
I know there's a lot of teachers who were like, wait a minute, what? You learn how many shows? I remember going to UNH and I was a grad student and it was, we did the one every week kind of thing. And it blew my mind. But, having college age students, and the shows are designed for them. They learn them pretty quickly. They remember them pretty quickly. And I assume the technology that you use helps with that a lot. Who does the arranging of the stand tunes?
I would say 90% of the arrangements that the band plays. Tim, who I mentioned earlier, usually does a couple of tunes. And then we have a new assistant director of bands, Emily Hamlin, and she wrote actually one short arrangement for the stands this year, and it was quite good. So I'm hoping that she'll get into writing more as we move along here.
And what about for the field shows?
Yeah,
Same thing?
I do. Yeah, I do. Again, I probably do 90 to 95% of the field stuff. I occasionally will purchase an arrangement, and usually it's from Scott Borma, who I think is the greatest college marching band arranger in history. Uh, but most of the time, I'm doing most of it. Okay, Tim, the associate here, will sometimes add a tune or two here and there.
Scott Borma, I have not heard that name before. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Oh gosh, yeah, Scott. Um, A lot of people who are in the drum corps know Scott as the arranger for the Madison Scouts
Okay.
for many, many, many years. I don't think he's doing them currently, but he um, he is the director of bands right now at Western Michigan University, and he was the former director of the Michigan Marching Band where I did my undergraduate. Not, I did not play for him. We're about probably he's probably a little arranger. I think his website is madisonmusicworks.com. So you can go there and check out his arrangements. But he's written stuff for all the major college bands, and he's the man.
Cool. Cool. What is two more questions on this sort of section. What do you guys still do like what we would consider in high school, like a technique block at the college level? Do you teach technique as part of it, or is it sort of set where it is and you're learning shows?
Do you mean for music or marching?
I more specifically towards marching.
Okay, we do a lot of that during band camp, and then we do a block at the beginning of every rehearsal, and we're doing for the last few years we've been doing marching health. Dr. Elliot Cleveland, marchinghealth.com. He's one of our grads. He was our drum captain about 10 or 12 years ago. Went on to become a physical therapy, doctor of physical therapy, and he has a side business called Marching Health. And so his team will come in a few times a year, but especially at the beginning, and teach us a health routine. So it's a dynamic stretching and a little bit of cardio. So we'll start every rehearsal in that block, and then we'll go straight to music warm up. And meanwhile, the drum line is off on the side doing their stuff while the wind section and visual units are doing the body warm up.
Okay, last question. What does a Saturday morning routine look like on game days in Clemson for the band?
Yeah, it depends on the time of the game. I'll give you an example, like a 1 p.m. kickoff. We'll
Sure.
meet at 8 o'clock, 8 a.m., and we'll do an hour and 15 minutes. And it's really more of just getting their heads in the game for the day because we will have had a rehearsal the previous evening, Friday evening, from 4 to 6, where we're hoping to leave Friday's rehearsal with everything ready to go. So Saturday morning is really just getting their heads in the game and having a couple of run throughs. And I typically don't like them to play full out, especially the brass section. You want to kind of pace them. So we'll do some runs with just the drum line playing and the wind players singing, and they'll sing their parts. And it actually sounds pretty good by the time we get to that point. And we have them focus on the drill more than the music. And then we'll do a light run through at the end with them playing as well. And I tell, especially the brass players, just to pace themselves. The screamer trumpets, don't cap everything. Just take it easy. Um, and then our alumni group will typically feed the band breakfast right after rehearsal at 9:15. Then we have some pregame stuff that's going on. We have a small group that goes over to the stadium and plays for the Tiger Walk. That's when the team arrives at the stadium. There's a big thing there with where the crowd, kind of gathers around. The team walks through the crowd. And then we have something that's called 90 Minutes Before Kickoff concert. That's on the center of campus in a beautiful amphitheater. So if a 1 p.m. kickoff, that pregame concert would be at 11:30 a.m. And then at noon, we'll march down to the stadium in the parade. And that takes about 20 minutes. And then the students have a little bit of time to chill out. Maybe not chill out. That's not a good word, especially early in the year. It's usually pretty hot, but they're in the shade in the tunnels of the stadium. We have bottled water for them, and they can relax for a little bit. And then our pregame show typically starts about 20 minutes before kickoff.
So let's get in a little bit to the culture of the Clemson marching band. I know this is something that you're passionate about, and kind of does it tie in with your philosophy and how that's changed as we age and all that? I think that's kind of the meat of our discussion today.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, I went to the University of Michigan for my undergraduate, and I marched in the band there. And as you can imagine, it wasn't too long after the time of Ravelli, maybe I got there about 10 years or so after he retired, maybe a little bit less than that. And it was a very disciplined and strict band. And I had never been in a marching band before because I went to high school. I went to a private high school that did not have a marching band. So this was all new to me. And it was very regimented, very militaristic. And um, I really dug it. Like it was very, very structured, and I had never had anything in my life really quite that structured. And so I took to it pretty quickly, and I um, really enjoyed the musical aspects of the band mostly. I was playing in the drum line, and but I thought the brass section, just knocked me over just to hear them how well they played, and the arrangements were just phenomenal. John Stout was the arranger there, and I was really in the marching band for musical reasons, and I was a music major, of course. So it was just another ensemble that I was playing in it, but it was a little bit different. I was playing in the orchestra, the concert band, percussion ensemble, jazz band. I was playing in the jazz band too. So I played in all the ensembles, but the marching band, I really dug the discipline of it. So when I graduated and I moved on, I was on the road for a little bit, and then uh, I was ended up at Ball State doing my master's degree as a TA. And, the vibe of the band was a lot different there. And it was really shocking to me. I thought all college bands were run the same way, so not that it was good or bad or whatever. It was just different, a little more relaxed, but, still high achieving. And then I got my first college teaching job at the University of Florida. And again, completely different culture from those first two college bands that I had been around. And then went on to do my doctorate at the University of Texas. So the Longhorn Band worked with the drum line and other sections there. And again, new culture, new. So I had, by the time I came to Clemson, I had four different college bands that I had worked with, four different cultures. But in my mind, I really had that first model in my head. The Michigan band was very disciplined, very regimented, um, no talking, all of that stuff. And, you know, when I got here to Clemson, it was a little bit of a rebuild situation, and the band was not anything like, you know, that level of discipline. So I was trying to toe the line um, between all the models that I had known. But in my mind, I still was like, it's a music ensemble. And then as the years went on, I realized, especially looking at the student evaluations, and we did some surveys like why are you in band? The number one reason was always social.
People. Yeah.
Yeah, my friends are in the band. I wanted to meet a group of people, because I was going away to college and I didn't know anybody, and I figured if I was in the band, I'd have a ready-made group of friends.
Sure.
And this kind of turned my head upside down, because in my own mind, I was going to build this incredible musical ensemble, and I think we've done that, but I changed my philosophy along the way to really gear it towards the social aspect. So I think the message is, if we had had this conversation 22 years ago when I first got to Clemson, I would tell you, no, that's not going to work.
Hmm.
And I'm here to tell you now in 2024 here that this is the way you have to do it. You pretty much, if you want to have a band and retain students, um, you've got to give them a great social experience as well as a great musical experience. I think you can do both. And so we do a lot of things to help um, move that social aspect along. Not that I'm not involved in any of it. We had the students do it. But we'll have movie nights. This past season, we had a movie night out at the band field. It was a nice evening. So the kids set up a big bed sheet on the rehearsal tower and got a projector. And since our last show this year was Dragons, they played the movie How to Train Your Dragon since we were doing some music from that show. So and then we have some other things. Mid-season, we'll have a barbecue Um, our alumni will come and cook a meal for them. Um, and just, lots of, we talked to this leadership at the beginning about creating an accepting culture in their section, no cliques, no, you know, we want everybody involved. Our ultimate goal is everybody who comes into the band as a freshman stays with the band for their sophomore year. That's sort of our goal. And we have to do it that way because Clemson is actually, compared to a lot of the schools that are, that you would think of, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas. So, we're a much smaller university than those, about half the student body. So in order to have a band of 350, we have to retain students. We have to give them a good experience. And a lot of that experience for them is social.
So you're making it kid centered, and I think no matter the age, that's really important. The word a lot of people you haven't used, but a lot of bands use is family, right? That family atmosphere.
Very
And
much.
I wanted to go back to, you mentioned some of your previous experiences, and we always take our first experience and we say that's how I'm going to run my band is like that, and then you have another one, you're like, okay, I'm going to choose between the two, and then you have three or four, and you go, wait a minute, okay, I'm going to create my own. That's sort of an amalgamation, if that's a word, of all of the different ones, and that's like your personal philosophy and how you want to run your band should be influenced by all the people you've learned from, but also something that's important to you with the students that are there with you at that time. So the fact that like you're saying at a, everybody's heard of Clemson who's listening to this, um, for you to say that you've changed your philosophy through the years and you center it around the kids you have right now, I think that's a message that can get to every level of band director, whether you're teaching fourth grade beginning band up through college.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about the concert group, programming to fit the students that you have in front of you, I do the same thing with the marching band as well. So I'll write the first show just sort of in my mind generic. There's nothing too outlandish in it. And I really just want to do that first show. It's high quality, but um, it's not geared towards any one particular direction in terms of like the players in the ensemble. And then once I get to hearing that year's band, I'll notice, oh, we've got a lot of really great mellophones this year. So the second show, I'll write some stuff for them that really features them. If you have 10 mellophone players who can all hit a high C, okay, here you go. Have at it. Whereas in the first show, I might not stretch out that in that direction. And this particular year, 2023, that we just finished, I had lost my two main screamer trumpets. Guys who can play Fs and Gs. I shouldn't say guys; girls can do it too. But it seems like it's always the guys that are trying to play high notes. But anyway, I lost the two main ones, and so I thought, uh-oh, So the first show I wrote very conservative, and then we had a bunch of freshmen show up who were playing Fs and Gs. So it's sort of we didn't have to rebuild. It was just a reload kind of thing. So the second show, I gave them some stuff that they could sink their teeth into. So even in the marching band, I try and tailor what we're doing to who we have in front of us, and I think that's one of our strengths is that since I'm the arranger of the music, I can do that um, as we go. You know.
Yeah. And you've mentioned arranging a lot of times. So for any band directors who are listening who are maybe budding arrangers or they would like to be able to arrange for their band or whatever, what advice might you have for them?
Well, there are a couple of books out there. I did not learn that way. I learned because at Michigan, my junior year, I became the drum captain. So we did not have any instructor. I was it. And we did 7 shows, 7 home games, 7 shows or six, whatever it was back then. And on Sunday, I would go to the band hall and pick up the 3 charts for Monday's rehearsal. And I would have to write the drum parts on Sunday afternoon and evening and copy all the parts in time for Monday's rehearsal. But what I did get was I got all those scores that John Stout had written, and I kept them in a box. I don't know why. I never imagined that I would arrange. I had done some things in high school. My high school band director had sort of forced the issue. He made me arrange some stuff for the jazz band mainly. But when I finished at Michigan, I had this box of arrangements that John Stout had written. And then when I got to Ball State, the director there, Joe Scagnoli, said, "Do you do any arranging?" And I said, "Not really, but I'd like to." And he said, "Well, why don't you write something?" So after my first year there, in the summertime, I just opened up this box of arrangements and I did an analysis of every single one of them. And I started out with like the last chord of the piece, major triad. How did he voice it? What note was in the first trumpet? What note was in the second trumpet, third trumpet, horn, all the way down the line. And so I had in my mind, okay, this is how you score a major triad. Like it's going to sound really loud and strong if you do it just like this. And so that was my starting point. And so I'll never forget. The next fall I wrote an arrangement of Huey Lewis, "Hip to Be Square." That was the hot tune that summer. And when we started playing with the band, I was just shocked and amazed that it sounded exactly like a John Stout arrangement. And how could it not? That he was my model, right? So I had and he studied with Jerry Billick, who was a very famous arranger at the University of Michigan before that in the 60s and 70s, maybe even a little bit earlier, 50s, 60s. And Jerry Billick went out to Hollywood and was a very successful arranger and orchestrator in LA. So anyway, yeah, that's how I got into it. I never really studied arranging with anybody. It was just self-taught with those scores that I had in my box.
Yeah, a message through Andy Boysen, who we both know. He asked me one time if I wanted to write for band, and this I was a teacher. I wasn't at school anymore, and I said, yeah, I'd kind of like to, but I don't really know how. I've never been taught. He's like, "Are you serious? You've studied how many hundreds of scores?" Yeah, like, so the message I would send to people is that like you have you have experience with the music that you would arrange, right? So take a composer like you're saying that you would want to emulate, or take a piece you really like and just learn about it and then write in that style. And I think for the band directors who don't want to arrange, hey, it's not something you need to do. But we do have that ability as arrangers.
Yeah, it's a scratch that I always in the back of my mind wanted to itch, and now that I've been doing it for a long time, my I'm sure my catalog is probably in the 350 to 400 charts range at this point. I don't know that I could not do it anymore. I love it. It's like a puzzle. You open up your screen and finale, and you have a blank score,
Hmm.
and you just start putting notes on the page, and yeah, I find it really fascinating. So that part of it I enjoy. Just sitting here at my computer. But then, when it's time to bring it to life, to bring it outside in front of the band and sort of rehearse it and get it to the point where in my mind it was when I arranged it, I really find that satisfying musically.
So you mentioned you have all those arrangements. Are those just sitting on your computer? Does anybody else play those arrangements or?
Sometimes, yeah, I'll get somebody who saw something on YouTube or something and say, "Hey, I heard this arrangement on YouTube. Would you mind selling it?" I've sort of avoided the whole business of selling my arrangements because of the copyright issues.
Mhm.
It would be very expensive. Um, some people do that, obviously, like Scott Vorma. He's got a whole website of stuff, and it's become a little bit easier to deal with that now. But no, I most of them just sit on my computer,
Hmm.
and but if you hear something on YouTube and you're interested, just hit me up.
That's awesome. All right, let's kind of transfer here into the conducting aspect, because when we were talking about this episode, the question I posed to you is, as someone who teaches undergraduate conducting, as someone who's taught people to be conductors, and you've seen many middle school, high school bands, college bands, and we all look at these bands and we also look at the conductors at the same time, and it's so quickly like you can spot things that conductors are doing well and conductors could improve upon. And see, I know this is something that is a kind of an issue in our profession, is that we get training and then you're out in the school and you're the expert, and you don't get training anymore. There's nobody sitting there going, hey, at the end of this rehearsal, your beat one is too big. You're not showing this. Like, we don't get that anymore. So, um, you know, we have this is the sad thing that I've realized a long time ago. Every day I'm doing things to help my band, but in a conducting way, I'm also doing things to hurt my band. And I wish I would know what those are. So I know you have some of those things that we can all learn from.
Yeah, first of all, this is fresh on my mind because we literally had our first conducting class yesterday morning. So it's definitely on my mind. But the one thing I always start out telling everyone who's beginning to learn how to conduct is, this is different than any other aspect of musical training because in order to practice conducting, you have to stand in front of a group of players. And if we told kids the only time you can practice your clarinet is if you're playing in front of 50 people, nobody would do that. There's a comfort level in being able to take your instrument into the privacy of the practice room and work things out, by yourself. Obviously you get instruction, but if you're learning a lick, you don't have to do it in front of everybody. Whereas conducting, yes, you can learn some mechanics and things outside of the ensemble situation, but really most of the learning happens when you're standing on the podium. You try a gesture, and it works or it doesn't, or you do something and the group either plays together or they don't, and you have to adjust and fix things in your own performance on the fly. Very difficult process, so we all need to cut ourselves some slack when we're standing up there. The other thing is, if you're trying to conduct at a very high level, it's very difficult to hear. Your ears shut down. The more you think about your physical body and what you're doing, the less you can hear what's happening. So a lot of times, especially in the early stages, again, as you're learning how to do this, a bomb could go off in the back of the room, and the young conductor wouldn't even hear it.
Yep.
Um, so you have to learn, this. You kind of have to go in and out of a thing. So when you're really trying to listen, maybe you're concentrating a lot less on your physical gesture. But then, maybe at some point in the rehearsal, you want to move into, okay, I'm going to conduct right now as if it's the concert, and you're not going to go back and fix things, because there's a continuum there. The more you're concentrating on your conducting, the less you hear, and if you kind of have to move back and forth.
Mm.
And then, the other thing I would say is young conductors tend to stop too much and talk too much. Bob Duke at the University of Texas has a whole thing on this. He's the what we would call the music education person there. They have a new name for it, which is much better, which I can never remember the name of it. But he's phenomenal in training young conductors and how to go about this process. But yeah, so it's whenever you can adjust things with your gesture without stopping. H. Robert Reynolds, who I played for at the University of Michigan, was just fantastic about this. He would stop and not say a word, or he might do this, trombones, and then we'd go back, and that was it. The only thing he said when he stopped was trombones, and he would give a gesture, and everybody knew what that meant, whatever it was. And wow, what a time saver. He could have gone on about, how exactly he wanted them to play, but he was, he would show the gesture, he would do it while we were playing. And then, there's nothing wrong with saying something while the music is going on.
Mhm.
So you're going along, clarinets, intonation, you don't have to stop and say clarinets, intonation. You could do it while they're playing. And I think kids, they come into rehearsal, they want to play. They want to play their instrument. They don't want to listen to whoever it is standing on the podium. I mean, they'll
Has
put up,
anybody ever thought, man, at the end of this rehearsal, man, I played too much,
right,
and I just wish
right,
I hadn't played as much. It's never happened.
right. They're not sitting there going, "Oh, I hope he stops and talks to us for 10 minutes." Nobody does that. Even if you're super interesting. So yeah, less talking in rehearsal. And these are all things, that may or may not get covered in an undergraduate conducting class. And then, one of my pet peeves is, which I never really had in any conducting class that I've taken, is the personal time of the conductor. So what I mean by that is your ability to keep an accurate tempo. So since I'm a percussionist, I'm very sensitive to fluctuations in time. And a lot of us are, because the parts we play in ensemble typically, for instance, a lot of contemporary music will have some kind of ostinato and, like, 16th notes on a hi-hat or a shaker or whatever it might be. It's sort of setting up the groove, or some kind of ostinato pattern, maybe a snare drum part that goes da 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 da. So if the tempo is fluctuating from the conductor, how do you play that part accurately? You're faced with a difficult dilemma as a player. Do I play the correct time, or do I fluctuate in and out with the conductor? And the better answer is, let's all get together on that time issue. So in rehearsals, a lot of times I will, my players look at me and think, okay, he's the expert. I'm gonna follow every ictus that he gives, and and I'll tell the percussionist, you're in charge. From letter A to letter B, you have that ostinato part, and I trust your time. I want you to play good time right there, and I want you to practice with a metronome so you're sure that you're doing it. And when we get there, I want you to be in charge of the time so that I can deal with other stuff. I can gesture towards the wind section. I don't have to worry about the time. So I'm giving up control of the time to that person. And then it becomes a more collaborative issue as well. So now time is not just my problem. It's that percussion player's problem. And then it really, because all the other players have heard me say that, they're more aware of it now too. And I'll point it out. I'll say, all right, everybody listen to John back there. Listen to this hi-hat part. And I want you to make sure you're listening to that between letter A and B so that we can all play our rhythms together. I do.
Sometimes if I do that in a rehearsal at the high school level, I'll say, okay, listen to this hi-hat part and now pat the beat along with it. So I know that they're doing it. So you're doing it and then the kids are all patting the beat and I said, okay, now let's play this part and listen to that. It's like an intermediary step.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in groove music, you have to be able to play accurate time. Everybody does, if it's going to groove. Now, in rubato music and chorales and slow music, not as important, obviously. But, so much contemporary music is groove based. So, everybody's got to be on their time game. So, I have a few ways that I teach. You can get better at this, obviously, but you have to practice it just like
Hmm.
any other skill that you have. Um, so you have to get a metronome out. So I do a thing where I ask people to practice with their metronome set on the upbeats.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's cool.
I've got my Dr. Beat here. I'll give you a quick example here. Um, Set this to 128. And so we've got 128 beats per minute, right? And so most people, if they're going to practice, let's say we're doing Stars and Stripes, da 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 da. Oh, bad battery. All right, so we'll pretend the metronome's going.
Wasn't
So
meant to be. Yeah.
yeah, bum, right. So that's how everybody practices. I ask my students to practice with the metronome set as an upbeat. Bum bum ba da bum ba 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 da ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba da ba 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 ba. Now, what that does is sort of forces the internal pulse issue,
Sure.
because if you can't play the music with the metronome set on upbeats, you're not really playing good time yet. You know, most people can play when it's on the downbeat, da 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 da. But when you turn it around like that, you kind of you get the pretenders and the real ones pretty quick. Um, The other thing I like to do is, especially with my conducting class, I'll take a reading of what their um, ability is to play upbeats. So maybe we'll set the metronome here. Da, 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 da. How fast can you play upbeats? And we'll find the tempo that they sort of break down. And then my challenge is to them is to improve that by 20 or 30 clicks by the end of the semester so that they can do upbeats at a faster tempo than what they come in. And that's improving your ability to keep time. And of course, the horn players, and to some extent, sax players, because a lot of times they're playing the horn part, they get really good at playing upbeats. So they're always the best ones starting out. So you got to get everybody else up to their level.
Couple other thoughts that came to me as you're giving all those of things I've heard people tell me through the podcast and through the years. Number one, you're most of us are conducting too big. We conduct too big, especially with younger bands, because we want to help them more and more. We conduct too large, especially on music that's supposed to go faster, and then the music gets slower and slower, and we conduct larger and larger, and it gets slower and slower, and then we blame it on the kids. Well, it's the kids, but it's also us. So conduct smaller, conduct less, show more by doing less. You said talk less. That's huge. At a personal experience of mine, we were doing a piece called Exultate by Sam Hazo. This was back in 2011. And if anybody knows this piece, letter C has like this maniacal woodwind part. Well, I had a really strong woodwind section and we could play it. I think it's 160 is the tempo of that piece, something. But the first letter A and letter B, it could be faster and slower. Like it didn't matter as much. Well, so at the concert, this was before I taught myself that I need to use a metronome before I start each piece at the concert because I was so excited to play this piece. And we start Exultate, and I got 4 bars in, and I realized what I had done. And my first chair clarinet player looks up to me as he's playing, goes, with his eyes, he says, what's about to happen, right? So we get to letter C, and it's a complete train wreck because they couldn't play it at 190. I mean, it was like stupid, but the beginning sounded great. So I always teach my students that when I put the metronome on before, whether it's jazz band, concert band, anything, before we start at a performance, it's not that I don't trust them; it's that I don't trust myself. So people learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, and one thing, especially beginning conductors, I will ask them right before they start, sing it right now, sing it. What is it going to sound like right now? And a lot of times sometimes they can't, like they're not sure. But that's a trick that I use. Like once you've gone through the rehearsal process, the piece is sort of in a groove. It's kind of it's basically the tempo it is. It is what it is, right? So when I'm about to start, I'm thinking of the music in my head, and if there's a difficult passage, like at letter C of Exultate, I'll sing that part in my head so that I know that it's at the right tempo, and then I'll start. So I don't start a piece until I hear it in my head. And if I don't hear it in my head and I'm looking at the score, this occasionally happens. Like you look down and like, what am I doing here? Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, here it is. Here's the tempo. Okay, now I'm going to start. Don't start until you're absolutely sure of what your tempo is.
Well, how many of us, when we were younger and we were, becoming proficient on our instrument, when we said our lesson teacher taught us pick the tempo based on the hardest part of the piece, like so it's the same thing as a conductor. Choose that letter C, whatever it is for you, and find where you should start it. Okay,
Yeah.
in a seamless segue, I know you're also really passionate about exercise science, nutrition science, things like that. So, sort of, what led you on that path, and what's the message?
Yeah. I was 49 years old. I'm 61 now, but I was 49, looking down the barrel of 50 years old, which at the time to me seemed like, oh my God, how did I get to be 50 years old? This is insane. I'm going to be an old man now. And at the same time, I had gone in for my annual physical, and my doctor, said, well, your blood pressure is a little bit high, your cholesterol is a little bit high, you're a little bit overweight. Um, it's time to put you on a statin and a high blood pressure medicine. And I knew intuitively that I did not want to start down the pharmaceutical pathway. And I asked him, you know, what else can I do? What are some other things besides popping pills for the rest of my life? And he said, well, lifestyle change, but most people can't do it. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not most people. So I left that office and, I just had an epiphany. So here I was looking at 50, my health wasn't that great. Um, there was some history. My parents both with heart disease. My father had a heart attack when he was 44. So I was 5 years past the age he was when he had a heart attack. My mother had heart disease. So, um, I was taking a serious look. Up until that age, I was just going to be 20 years old in my mind forever, you know, but things were happening to my body and I was like, yeah, I'm getting old. I gotta deal with this. So a couple things happened. Mainly, I met up with another physician who was an ER physician in our town, and his children and our children went to school together. So we met at a school function, and he had a gym where people go and work out with a personal trainer. And I said, "Well, I don't have time for that." And he said, "No, it's only 15 minutes a week." And I said, "15 minutes a week?" And he said, yeah, that's all you need to do. You can get huge health benefits 15 minutes a week. So I was like, all right, any excuse I had about not exercising was out the window because everybody has 15 minutes a week that you can devote to this. Now, so I started that. It's brutal. I'm not going to lie. It's the worst 15 minutes of my week, but the health benefits have been amazing. But anyway, I started this workout and I saw this same doctor 6 weeks later and I said, Doug, I've been working out I've done 6 workouts and I haven't lost any weight. And we were at a buffet line together. And he said, yeah, you can exercise your way out of a bad diet. And I looked at his plate and I looked at mine and they were completely different, right? So then he turned me on to the paleo diet, which is otherwise known as the caveman diet, ancestral diet, evolutionary diet. It's basically the concept is eat what humans evolved to eat over the last 2 million years, not what we've been told to eat over the last 50 to 100 years, or even 10,000 years. There was a big decline in human health when we went from hunter-gatherers just moving about the landscape and then when we planted ourselves in one place and began farming, our health declined. Average age of death went from like 50 to 20. So, some ridiculous number like that. Um, so eat the food that we evolved to eat over 2 million years of human evolution. So basically that means, and this is, if you don't know anything about this, this seems mind-boggling, but no grains, because that's when farming started. Humans started growing plants and they had to do a lot of things to make them edible because wheat has natural insecticides on it. The wheat plant doesn't want to get eaten by insects, so it has something in it, that messes up the insect's digestive system. Well, it's going to mess up our digestive system too. There are just toxins in there, and really, it's true of almost anything that we eat. There are toxins, and we've evolved to deal with them. Now, we haven't really evolved. People know about celiac disease, where they can't have gluten or whatever, and that's really a spectrum. No human really can tolerate gluten. It's just how much you can tolerate it. And some people can't tolerate it at all, and some people just don't notice it that much. But essentially, humans evolved eating a low carb diet. There weren't like a ton of carbs in the diet. So that is essentially getting back to what we're designed to eat evolutionary wise. So I track my intake from time to time, and I usually am under 100 carbs a day. Average American eats about 350 carbs a day. So anyway, long story short, I went back the next year to my doctor. I'd lost a bunch of weight. I'd gained a bunch of muscle. He looked at me and he said, wow, what the heck did you do? And I said, well, you told me lifestyle change. So yeah, so I've been on that. I'm 61 years old now, and still no pharmaceuticals. My blood pressure is great. My cholesterol is great. There's really nothing that the doctors can find on a blood test or any kind of other test that indicates any concern whatsoever. So, my goal is to make it to the end of my life um, without having to pop any pills. Now, if I have to do it at some point, I have to. But certainly at the age of 61, every time I go to any kind of appointment, they ask you to bring your medications. I come in and you didn't bring your medications, and I just say, well, I don't take anything, and they're shocked. There's no 61-year-old that doesn't take medication. Well, there's a few of us out there, but you have to work at it. You have
Yeah.
to work at it.
That's awesome. A couple things I wrote down. We talk about losing weight, and like losing weight's important for sure. But when you gain muscle, like some people get much more fit and they have much more muscle, but they see the scale doesn't necessarily reflect that. So some people just throw away the scale and focus on the lifestyle and the muscle. Protein is huge. I mean, if we're low on protein and you're on a podium in front of a bad band, oof, I don't want to be there. So get enough protein, and not just like if it says protein on the package, eat it. No, like good protein, a lot of protein. And my number one thing along with all this is sleep. Like again, we've all been in front of bands that are good and it's a treasure. But more often than not, we're in front of, at least for me, bands where you got to work on a lot of things that maybe you don't really want to work on, but you have to do it. So like when I'm overtired, like I can get through a day if it's like a professional development day. It's like, okay, I'm dragging, whatever. But when you have to motivate 14-year-olds who can't play with a good embouchure and you feel like crap, it's not fun. So to
Right.
me, like I'm in bed by 9, period. Like they say 7 hours. No, give me 8.5, 9. Like I would much rather sleep more. So I mean, those people who are like burning the candle, and I think there's at a while, if you're a band director in your 20s, you can kind of live that a little bit. But at some point you realize, man, it's not worth it. Yeah, I like staying up and watching the Clemson game, but I can record it now and I can feel good on the podium the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other part for me personally is game days can be long. I wear an iWatch and track my steps and all that stuff. And a typical game day will be 25,000 steps.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to get through that without having issues. Um, and if we're on the road, let's say a bowl game or something, and there's a parade and a performance here or there, you can hit even more than that. Um, and that you need you need to be in good shape for all of that stuff. You can't be um, doing this in your 60s unless you've taken care of yourself. You know.
All right, Mark. So thank you so much for being on with us today. Really appreciate the wide-ranging conversation. We're going to end up with some recommendations for composers you like and that people should know about, or pieces that you think are really important.
Well, I'm real big on new music. I'm constantly playing new music, so I'm always looking for the next great composer. Not that I want to leave any of the other ones behind, but of course, some of my favorites, David Maslanka, John Mackey, that are more recent, let's say. Um, and I also try and I've been doing this for many, many years, even before it became fashionable, I guess, fashionable, if that's the right word. Um, Programming music by a diverse set of composers as well. So all of my programs are diverse in terms of the composers. So I'm learning a new piece right now that I'm going to be taking out on the road, the honor bands the high school bands that I'm conducting. This one is called Lost Valley by Jennifer Rose. I've never done it before, and it involves electronics, an electronic track that we play along with. I'm really into that. I love that Alex Shapiro. She's a wonderful composer of this type of music, technology using technology. Steve Bryant wrote a fantastic piece called Ecstatic Waters. I think that was 2009. Just an incredible, incredible, groundbreaking work. Um, And then some of the younger ones, Viet Quang, if you don't know him, you have to learn about his music right now. Katash Copley, very prolific. He's studying at the University of Texas with Omar Thomas. Omar Thomas, fantastic composer. Kevin Day, another wonderful young composer. And these younger composers, even though they're writing pieces for, the University of Texas Wind Ensemble or, the Eastman Wind Ensemble, they're also very aware. They came out of school band programs too, and they're writing, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. They're very conscious of writing music that's playable. So I think this is a wonderful time for the band repertoire. You know, Here we are in the 21st century, and there's no other medium that has the incredible range of repertoire that we're creating right now. It's really just a wonderful time.
So, thank you for that. And you sort of sparked my imagination. So, as we finish this episode, I'm going to have people listen to two pieces, recordings of two pieces. One is a piece, I don't think you mentioned it. I think it's a grade 2 that's in the electronic realm by Stephen Bryant called The Machine Awakes. I don't
Yep.
remember if I missed that you said it or not, but I'm
I
thinking
did.
of the
I did. Yeah.
of the grade 2. If people are like, that's great, but my band's a grade 1.5 or 2. So I'll play a little bit of Machine Awakes for you. And then you mentioned Lost Valley by Jennifer Rose. That is available. So we'll have I'm going to play people a snippet of that as well. Looking forward to hearing that piece. Mark, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate the time very much.
Of course. Glad to be here.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.